basically because the reopening and today's show is a little bit different in the sense that on looking at
And good day, and welcome to another edition of Ocean Freight TV. I'm your host, Steve Ferreira, and I'm CEO of Ocean Audit. Of course, as you know, a global ocean and logistics refund consultancy based here in Miami, Florida. So great to see you guys again, and good day to everyone out there in my viewing audience. You know, I was listening to some communications on LinkedIn amongst a bunch of fellow influencers on what this market's all about. And you know, this title of today's show is interesting. This feels different. And it's really cool because I didn't put together this slide until after I had spoken to some of these other folks. You know, for example, a good friend of mine, Blythe from Levy, and you know, Blythe's been commenting pretty regularly that, you know, this market just feels different. There's just something weird or off about this market. And I agree. I look for the unique approaches to bring my audience here at Ocean Freight TV. And of course, you know, I'm CEO of Ocean Audit. And when I meet clients and we do refunds and recoveries all over the world, you know, it's really interesting that there are so many storylines within our ocean freight trade that the media doesn't report, we don't see, or we take for granted, or, you know, we're in the throes of our normal work, helping improve customer profitability, in my case, and at the same time, I think it's important that all customers, all players and participants, right, in the ocean game, so to speak, understand what lies beneath the surface. And so I thought, you know, my new branding campaign was me in this bathtub and, you know, looking pretty grim. And I must admit, you know, it was pretty good to get out of my comfort zone. But at the same time, when we start looking at why this market's different, you know, we have to look for a lot of underlying reasons. There are some reasons that will surprise you and some that won't. I broke down today's show, you know, the time that we have together, 20, 25 minutes. You know, there's so many different storylines to cover. I wanted to give you the unique, the different, the offbeat, the norm, and put it all together, right? So that, you know, you can experience, like many clients and followers of mine experience, that, hey, you know, I took something away from Steve's show. So again, welcome to Ocean Freight TV. You know, we've got a great new studio set that we're working from, and new set of glasses to bedazzle in, and looking forward to unveiling also the new look of Ocean Freight TV and Ocean Audit coming up in the next few weeks. So lots to come. Lots of content to produce, to put out, and lots to share with you. You know, why it looks different, why this market looks different, is that I was fortunate to live in Europe for 10 years, close to 10 years. And in those times of living abroad, I had the chance to be in Russia once or twice. And you know, Russia to me is always like a Grisham novel or a Ludlum novel or a James Bond type experience. You know, you never know what you're going to get, you know, with Russia. And some very, very interesting and unique experiences that I had in my lifetime over there. And some of those still continue. And I love spy movies. Everyone knows me, knows I love spy movies. And in one of the recent movies, talk about Russia House. Like there's a spy in Russia House, like a spy is infiltrating the CIA. It was a movie Angelina Jolie was in. And so Russia House to me is really interesting because, we've got this brutal war. And, from time to time, I was one of the first ones on the scene looking at the Russian crude oil and then how the Russians changed the blend, right, to allow some Kazakhstan oil to come in. But today's story on Russia House is a completely different story. And it all has to do with construction and the wood products. Now, of course, we know Russia to be second to Canada, I guess, in terms of forestry and the kind of the accoutrements that come with that. But shipments of a high-grade birch plywood, which I understand are used in new home constructions for floors. This birch plywood is, I guess, from Russia, a durable type strain or genus. Is that the right word? And it's still flowing into our country like, not water, because the shipments are down 25% of what they were in 2022. But what's interesting about the story is that there's a 50% kind of war penalty duty that's been thrown on these birch plywood shipments. But yet, even with the heavy duty, these shipments still flow. And why is that? Well, I'll tell you exactly why that is. Because, look, maybe it's because this is raw and I'm in the market zeroing in on a beautiful new construction house here in Miami. And you look at the price tag for the house and it's like, wow, I mean, this is like the house of a lifetime, right? But in that are all the components, right? Like I told my wife the other day, hey, honey, look at this refrigerator. Look how much that cost, right? And like these prices were like scary to me. But, right, when you're doing this kind of thing and they're putting in a birch plywood floor with wood from Russia, it's like, what the hell do I care, right? I mean, yeah, I care, of course, but those costs and that tariff and duty are all rolled into what I'm paying, on my purchase and sale agreement, right? So whether I'm paying, and I'm just making this number up, $25,000 for the wood or, $35,000 or $40,000 for the wood, I'm paying it. It's not like buying a Volkswagen, right? Where there's a line itemization to this stuff. And so I really think, and again, this surprised me because I did a little research on this and I was actually surprised to see so much Russian plywood moving. And this is moving predominantly on Ro-Ro ships out of, I believe, St. Petersburg and the region. And, there are some, obviously some very legitimate, businesses here in the U.S. that have been set up to trade on this plywood. So I guess the issue is that, with the way the Biden administration has been trying to protect the American consumers, you're almost twixt in between, right? Do you put more tariffs on this stuff and then increase the price of housing? So it's already obviously outrageous beyond, reach of many, many people, right? The housing costs here in the U.S. And this is a major, major issue, right, with this Russian plywood. So I think that Russia House, right, is, and some correspondent in the press made a note that this is $1 billion business per month. I don't know if it's that much, but certainly this is revenue that Russia is probably laughing all the way to the bank on. So it's something that, again, has flown totally under the radar. Maybe we want to know about it, maybe we don't want to know about it, but it's there for the taking and for your consumption. And I thought that was an important part from Motion Freight TV to help share that with you because I have not heard this anywhere elsewhere. So you can kind of call this a breaking or an exclusive. And, with Russia House always comes, sticky situations. And so sticky situations in this case is I've seen a commodity, polymer modified bitumen, right, which is an asphalt kind of, and that's a picture of it there, right there on your screen. And it's used in road constructions and roofing materials and so on and so forth. Kind of a petroleum-based product, but used in asphalt road making, asphalt and tarring type environments. The scary, silly thing on this is that this week alone, I've seen 200 containers of this product. Now, don't get too upset, right? It's moving from Russia into Mexico. But yeah, it's moving through a U.S. port because I'm able to have visibility on this shipment only because it was transshipped in a U.S. port. Otherwise, I wouldn't see the visibility. But it's interesting that I've never seen this product ever move from Russia to Mexico before, right? So Russia is finding ways to get, first thing that comes to my mind is exotic products. Now, I wouldn't call bitumen an exotic product, but Russia is finding new markets and deriving income from that market. Now, what's especially concerning, or perhaps interesting is a better word, is the roofing and asphalt tiles and shingles that go on roofs, right? So I believe that Mexico is probably a pretty good producer of tile shingles, roof shingles. And I don't know if that's a product of Mexico and that's coming into the US, but it's made with a component from Russia. So we have that issue to contend with as well, where a third country commodity, it's not like, again, buying a Hyundai or a Kia where on the sticker it says, 25% of the product made in Mexico, 75% in South Korea, right? We don't have that on, a typical commodity like bitumen, right? But it is unusual, right? So we're seeing, and maybe it's just the fact that the market's changed a little bit, right? But we are seeing these unusual kind of movements. Now, with the royal coronation, what else could I say about, spare parts? You see what I did there. So we've got our good friend here, Prince Harry. Not that I know him, right? But, spare is a bestseller. And what seems to be a bestseller is spare parts, spare auto parts, that is. And what I found in this marketplace is that spare auto parts, relative to the overall markets, are surging, right? Look at Toyota year-to-date versus, say, 2022 of the same period. Basically, Toyota has imported the same amount of containers in January to May 23 as they did January to May 22. For example, the overall market, when you include after-products manufacturers, aftermarket manufacturers, retail stores that have auto parts, basically that market is pretty even, 23 versus 22. And everyone said, hey, 23 sucks. But this market is pretty hot. Hyundai America, the automaker, into Alabama for their Alabama plant, had 95 containers on one CMA ship alone this week. It's an amazing quantity, and almost, I believe, it takes the shipment of the week, right, in terms of the most amount of containers on a single bill of lading. So auto parts, spare auto parts, as they may be described in the manifest, are big business today in the Americas. The one thing I see is, obviously, with the price of cars increasing and the economy kind of flatlining, this is this is really interesting, right? You know how in COVID times, people didn't buy the new cars because they wanted to fix up their own, and you had no cars to buy. Now you have cars to buy, but people don't have the money. So it's really interesting how I believe, in my estimation as an ocean freight expert, the spare part manufacturers, auto part manufacturers, brake rotors, all that good stuff. Shout out to my good client over Jack Conahan over at AutoZone. These companies are doing great things, and their stock prices are, showing the great results that these companies are having with their consumers and in the market in general. One commodity that is always near and dear to me is the Christmas market. And I titled this next segment "Quality Over Quantity." When I was based in Taiwan, I don't know, call it nostalgia, but there was nothing more important to me than, working with, for example, General Electric and, I believe there was Noma Manufacturing in Chicago. These are all kind of names from the past and maybe still the current, that had, made Christmas lighting and Christmas decks and trees in Taiwan. And of course, much of that business has moved to China and other countries, Vietnam, Thailand. But the Christmas market is an interesting market. And January to May of this year, now this is not containers, but I look at invoices issued, right? Because I'm kind of an invoice guy on the ocean side. So it could be, 2,497 invoices with, 8,000, 9,000 containers. I don't want to talk about the containers right now. But let's just talk about raw invoices, how many invoices were issued. Right? I think that's important. Another important way to look at this. 2,497 invoices versus 6,000 plus last year. Now, this rings out to me clearly. And again, I've got some great clients out there that are in the Christmas markets, and they could address this better. And I hope you will comment on LinkedIn on your perceptions on this. But I believe that, this could be a major functional area of the charter era that we went through. If you recall a lot of the charters, right, we were having, so many charters that would have the Christmas decorations, and, everyone didn't want to get caught short, right? Home Depot did it. Many other retailers did it. And, we saw a huge uptick on Christmas trees and Christmas decorations on the charter ships, paying a pretty penny, right? And so I think that, again, I wrote a book, Navigating B2B, on, how to kind of work the magic between companies. And I think that the other opportunity here is maybe as navigating B2C. How will the Christmas tree manufacturers navigate Q3? Will a late surge of Q3 trees and decorations help offset some of the losses that we've seen year to date? Now, in fairness and in defense of the industry, this is not normally the time where you'd see Christmas items moving. However, I believe we had a little bit of a hangover effect on the inventory from last year, and that may be, and I'm going to go on a limb and say that's probably one of the salient issues in terms of being over inventoried. And certainly it doesn't help when you see, a retail like Bed Bath & Beyond have their filing, and I believe one of their subsidiaries, either the Christmas store or Christmas tree store. Pardon me if I don't have that right. So I think that you look at participants in this market, we always see, these decorations go up earlier and earlier at the retail level. Let's see how it will impact Americans' spending habits and discretionary spending habits in 2023, or will we kind of flatline through the rest of the year and not see that market surge? And that market is, in my opinion, that Christmas market is, one of the top 10 or 15 items that, I would typically look for to call the ball on a seasonal surge, right? Be it a true peak. And I would expect to see that component, as well as, again, like backpacks and school supplies and whatnot. And of course, your typical LCD TVs, right? As you start to see more on the Black Friday side, but slowly moving to the Christmas side. And as you start to talk about retail, it's kind of like, you talk about Halloween, and to me, it's like, it's the Monster Mash, right? And, the Monster Mash is no joke here, but it's because I found a new importer that struck my fancy, and it's not a plug for them. I don't know them at all. I just found out about them this morning in my research, because I wanted to see what kind of influence ChatGPT or artificial intelligence had on the ocean freight markets. And I can tell you that this is the first ocean import I've seen that features a type of artificial intelligence. And what this is a company called MashGen. I believe it's a Chinese company with, don't get me wrong, I want to say offices in Las Vegas. But they've invented a new type of self-checkout, right? I'm a big fan of CVS, great client of mine, and I go to CVS, and there'll be a long line, so I'll go into CVS and I'll scan my my Coca-Cola or whatever it is I'm buying, and it's just like what you do at the Home Depot, right? You barcode it and blah blah blah. You do that, but this is a whole new type of artificial intelligence where you don't scan a barcode, you put the items on kind of a platform, right? Looks like a scale, whatever you want to call it, and you just line them up. You have your aspirin, your Coca-Cola, the bag of cookies, right, and the pet supplies. Just put them into one batch, and this mass-gen scanner scans them. No barcode, no scanner needed, right? It photos them and it evolves. And we're starting to see these machines being imported in from China. The first time I've seen this, and it looks fascinating. So might be a good feature story for the media to pick up on, the fact that this product's coming in featuring this artificial intelligence. I think it's really cool. It kind of reminds me of the days when I was doing some work for the Wall Street Journal or Business Insider, and we were talking about Lyft or Lime or these portable scooters, these electric scooters that were moving, or even the heady days of autonomous vehicles, when we started to see, and right now, like I'm on the scope right now to see, when are we going to see the first forebearing of Apple's, autonomous vehicle? Will they let a footprint out that tells us that something is coming, that is a new product for them? So like this mass-gen scanner, this is a very interesting new product for me to see. And again, I don't know how this compares, for example, with some of the Amazon store technology on Amazon Go. But to me, it's a very exciting development, especially as you look towards a more efficient way to utilize AI. But at the same time, how does this impact retail labor forces, since cashiers and checkout hierarchies are always a big part of the job and employment situation in our country. So it remains to be seen how that's looking. I have to tell you guys, right? So there's nothing better. That was my experience in 2 years or two seasons of doing shows for FreightWaves, and I love the guys over there, and great content you guys are putting out. Hey everyone, hey Craig, and I love your FreightWaves, and I'm so glad that I'm doing my own shows and being able to monetize my shows in the way that I want. And I have a small little kind of ad hoc aside that I like to add in terms of why this story demands a little bit more color, right? So FreightWaves just came out a few days ago and said a second half freight rebound increasingly unlikely, based on their product called Sonar, which imagines or looks at bookings as opposed to landed product, right? Which again, apples to oranges, but and you can debate that till the cows come home in terms of which one is the most efficient. So they looked at 2019 when they kind of made this comparison, versus 2023. And, while I won't deny the fact that, the markets are down, I think we have to look at this differently, right? So, okay, let's take a look at 2019 levels versus 2023. So, for example, Amazon Logistics in January to May 2019 had 3,487 containers. In January to May 2023, they have 44,000 containers. Vietnam has had 177,000 shipments in 2019 in January to May versus 260,000 here in January to May 2023. Now, the most telling stat that I love is for the first 10 days in China, from China to the US, and this is landed to the US, we had 219,000 shipments, May 1 to May 10. That's right, just a few days ago, right? And the same period in 2019, we had 198,000. So we're actually seeing an improvement and an increase, right? Now, this is China. I'm not going to, take my whole show and cut through every country, the Sudan, Australia, Italy. Okay, I get it, right? But I think it's really important, like in my audits, right? If somebody says, well, Steve, we have 20 vendors. Okay. Let's look at the top 6, because the top 6, make up 80% of your volume. And it's similar to that in the ocean-borne trades, right? Where's your 800-pound heavyweights, right? And China is certainly one of them. The fact that China is recovered, this may be the biggest story of today's episode on Ocean Freight TV. I think that we need to freeze this and lock this in. And now this, I would say, does fly directly in the face that a second half freight rebound is increasingly unlikely. I think it's absolutely likely. And it may well be, right, that some of those commodities that were low, like Christmas trees and decorations, some of those commodities that were somewhat flat, but in a good way, auto parts, start to soar and surge. And we do have a true peak season. I think that's the relevant part of this story. And it has there's a lot of legs to support that. Now, we talked a lot about the crazy Russia house and the lumber, the plywood, but we kind of do have our own housing crisis. And, like Lori and LaRocco of CNBC told me, and I helped in some parts of her award-winning book, Containers Don't Lie. We have some issues with construction components, right? Coming in, housing materials, building materials, construction components. And here's where I'd say to FreightWaves, okay, I get your data, but there's more to the story, right? So if you look at January to May 2023, we had 3,200 shipments comprised of a certain amount of containers. 2022, we had 4,300, and in 2019, we had 5,100. So the market was significantly better for building materials, home construction materials, and construction supplies in 2019 than it was today. No question. However, here is the difference, right? And this is the reason why you can't just look at the data, right? New construction starts have surged in permits and in new builds in 2023 versus 2019 dramatically. I looked at the state of California, I looked at the state of Texas, the new permits for new builds, and it could be anything from an office park to a apartment structure to a single family home. These permits are way up. And what does that mean? That means that we will see a surge in Q3 of building material. Actually count on it. We have to, because we have to be able to, those new permits, building permits, have to be able to source products somewhere. Now, I get what you're saying. Could there be an inventory side effect there, or an after effect, or a hangover is the better word? Possibly. Now, when it relates to issues like, for example, flooring and vinyl tile, ceramic tiles. I remember the Home Depot brought in boatloads of that kind of product. That's a safe product. That doesn't necessarily change designer year by designer year in terms of whether it's designer white or designer black or designer tan color, right? You've got fundamental colors that apartment units, builders, consortiums use, right? So if Home Depot has a great deal on a tan tile, ceramic tile from 2019, 2020, it's still in warehouses, great, right? It's good. Use it and get a deal on it. So that's the kind of, some of the side of impact issues on construction materials. But we also have to remember, right, there has to be something on both sides of the equation. So like this Canadian lumber, and we talked earlier in the introduction of my show today on Russian plywood and Russian birch plywood, right, which is a competing product with this Canadian stuff. Now, this Canadian stuff, a lot of that starting to move. Guess who's resurging, right? China, right? They're opening up again. And, so we're seeing, massive quantities of Chinese lumber, Canadian lumber, moving to places like China, to other markets. So I would agree with my friend Blythe from Levy that the market is very confusing right now because everyone seems to be sourcing in different ways than they ever did before. But is it a bad thing? Not necessarily. But it's a changing thing. And it's one that we as professionals have to be able to call the ball on and have that change of paradigm that when we're looking at markets, we can swiftly and succinctly navigate from one market to another because these markets are ever changing. So I think that the housing crisis that we have, of course, I look at my own individual scenario here with what we're trying to do with our house here in Miami, our new house. And, I like the fact that it's brand new construction, but I also know from just being a thought leader in the industry that, wow, if I only broke out, what the components were, just like that Volkswagen Golf or Lincoln Navigator, right? What's the line items? And so you hear that all the time. And, especially we get that on logistics invoices, right? Everything has a line item. And it makes it much easier for, someone like myself to say, hey, you got a $10,000 refund because that line item, was not part of the deal, was not part of the contract. So I think that containers really never lie. And when you talk about the whole aspect of how things are looking blurred below the surface and how this just feels different, I think that today's issue of Under the Surface with Steve helps to give you some color to the ocean industry that you might not have known before. And certainly my goal at Ocean Freight TV, as well as my stewardship over Ocean Audit, which helps clients all over the world protect and regain lost working capital, help to bring you the unique nuances that you can take away. And these are great conversation starters for working with your incumbent ocean vendors or 3PLs or NVOCCs. And think about it, right? We're all part of the same fabric, the same network, the same layers. And what's impacting us in the data is certainly impacting your providers and your vendors et al., right? And I think that that's a key component. So I hope you enjoyed today's show, and next week we'll bring you another interesting and dynamic edition at Ocean Freight TV. Until we meet again, have a great weekend. I'm Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Freight TV and Ocean Audit, signing off. We'll see you soon. Thank you again.